What if one day could open your heart, spark your spirit, and connect you to your most authentic self? That day is Saturday, August 23rd from 10 to 6 at the Litz Rock Shops Woo Woo Festival at the Taylors Falls Memorial Community Center, located at 312 Government Street in Taylors Falls. Explore tarot, oracle, psychic, and mediumship readings. Listen to inspiring speakers covering fascinating metaphysical topics. Soak in the calm tones of live hand pan music. Shop handcrafted goods, crystals, metaphysical tools, books, and more. It's just $5 cash at the door as a free will offering. And remember, Taylors Falls is a destination. Come out for the festival and stay to explore the natural beauty, historic charm, and energy of this incredible town. And yes, there will be walking tacos.
The Let's Rock Shops Woo Woo Festival, Saturday, August 23rd from 10 to 6 at 312 Government Street, Taylors Falls Memorial Community Center. Just $5 at the door. Come for the woo, stay for the wonder, and the walking tacos.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story. This is our story. This is GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
And this is GhostBox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on this Wednesday evening. I would like to just say to our listeners in the Twin Cities, please drive very carefully tonight. It is very slick out there with our first snowfall of the year. So as always, once again, please, as always, make room for plows and anyone else that are trying to get in through whether emergency or whatever else. But please be careful out there. We're going to get right to it tonight. And we're talking with my guest, Paul, about this, that we just kind of want to get started on this. The JFK conspiracy of his assassination, I think, is one of those things that, first of all, I don't think has run out of steam. And it's people been questioning it pretty much for as long as I can remember. That's always been the big question. There's so many moving parts to it and stuff. And last year, I had a guest on, and he had a book about conspiracies, and he pretty much looked at the JFK conspiracy as a non-event. Like, this is not a conspiracy. And I respect his opinion, but to me, that still didn't ring true. And so when author Paul Blake Smith, last time he was on, we're talking about Eisenhower and UFOs. When he was on last time, he talked about that he had written a book about the JFK conspiracy. We'll talk about that a little bit. And I knew right away, November, as we are heading into the 61st anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, that this is still something that I don't know if we're any closer to really figuring anything out, but I'm looking forward to Paul talking about it. We've had Paul on a couple times before. We've had him on more recently talking about his book, President Eisenhower's Close Encounters, which is fantastic. The first time we had him on was earlier in the summer and I just love this book, The Nixon-Gleason Alien Encounter. These are books, if you do not have them, please go and get them. You can get them on ghostboxradio.com, Ghostbox Book Club, but you can also get them on Amazon. And these are worthwhile. The JFK book that he had written, JFK and the Willard Hotel Plot, is not available. But I did see that if you go to Amazon, there are some copies there. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome author Paul Blake Smith to GhostBox Radio. How are you doing tonight?
Chupacabra. I'm not sure which one I am if I listen to your introduction, but I'm doing pretty well. It's turned cold and nasty, and I guess in Minnesota it's wet, cold, and nasty.
Yeah, it's one of those nights. It's one of those nights where it's just sloppy and I never understand. I mean, unless you have to, and people do have to go out. I get that. If you don't need to, why are you going out? But that's a different story for our talk about meteorology someday, right, Paul? I mean, that's really what we'll wait for that one.
Well, we've got a much better story to talk about when you're staying home out of the bad weather. Who killed President Kennedy and why? And was Lee Oswald firing his rifle? And was he alone? And it's a legitimate question even to this day, because the government won't tell you much. They're still withholding lots of documents. I sent Greg just the other day 3 pages of an FBI report that had been withheld for a long time and leaked, and talked about how an entire bullet fell out of President Kennedy's clothing as they were, I think, setting him in his casket.
Yes,
and,
yes.
Yeah, it was like, that wasn't supposed to be. That, the whole thing rests on the single bullet theory that hit President Kennedy from behind, went out his throat, and went into John Connally seated ahead of him or in front of him in the limousine. And, of course, it's nonsense. Those same FBI agents who noticed this whole bullet also wrote a report and said, we saw this little brown paper sack of bullet fragments at the autopsy we were observing at Bethesda Naval Hospital. And so, what? There's not supposed to be any bullet fragments in the president's brain, which was removed at the autopsy. And I don't think it was ever fully returned, and it was lost, apparently destroyed over the years, separate from the body, which was not given an open casket funeral. So that, everything about this case smacks of mystery, if not conspiracy. I am of the opinion that Oswald was a knowing part of it, that a friend of his, I think named Ron Lewis down in New Orleans, said, in the summer, I saw him on and off, and I told him, you really shouldn't get involved in this. And he said, keep your mouth shut, mind your own business. He even tried parading through the streets of the business district of New Orleans at one point with his rifle broken down in a brown paper sack to see if he could get away with it. Would anyone notice? And that's the method of operation that he undertook on the day of the assassination, when he was given a ride to the Texas School Book Depository. And he had what he said were curtain rods. Well, how many of you would construct a special brown paper packaging for a couple of curtain rods you were going to put in your apartment, which was his excuse, a lame one? I think he was there, and he took part from the window and fired shots that were very noisy, and they were designed to get people's attention, to look backwards, because the main shots were going to come from largely in front. And I believe the story, I read a number of times for a number of sources, that said one bullet hole pierced the windshield from outside going in and hit President Kennedy in the throat. There was no point of exit. And at one point during his autopsy, somebody reported that the bullet went down his trachea and into his lungs. So that was the first shot, I think, came in. And you can see on the Zapruder film, President Kennedy's waving, and then he stops and he puts 2 hands and he starts doing this because he's been shot from in front. And Jackie leans over and puts his hand down like, what are you doing? And at that moment, his head jerked back from this terrible shot in front that went out and blew out a hole in the back of his head about the size of a fist or a softball. Almost everybody says that's what they saw. Even a Secret Service agent, Clint Hill, said, yeah, there was a big hole in the back of his head, which doesn't make any sense with a lone gunman firing just a couple of shots from behind. And, the whole thing was covered up for whatever reasons they had. They didn't basically want the American people to panic like there's a whole team of gunmen out there. They used Oswald as what I call the designated guilty patsy. He even said at a press conference in Dallas, I'm just a patsy. Well, yeah, you were the one they threw over to take the blame.
Right. And I always thought that was, when just as you said that now, it seems like that those words were very true. And, I don't know if he was trying to say that in the sense of like, I did nothing wrong whatsoever, I'm just a patsy. But in this case, it's very much like, yeah, you knowingly were a tool being used by the government for this assassination.
Yeah. One of the statements Oswald made, and he didn't get much of a chance to talk after he was arrested in front of the press, was, I didn't shoot anybody. No, sir. And some Dallas policeman said later in an interview, that's what every single person says when we bring them in. Everybody's innocent. It wasn't me. No, it was somebody else. I didn't do this. Nobody goes in and confesses, yeah, you caught me. I murdered these guys and tried to get away with it. You always say, I didn't do anything. So that doesn't exactly hold water. And in the course of the research for this book from 2018, from Argus Publishing, JFK and the Willard Hotel plot, I found a very interesting document from a government employee who said Lee Oswald stepped out of the Willard Hotel about a block from the White House in late September of '63 and confronted me. He was a real jerk, and I never forgot it. He said he was in your face talking about how this employee had parked his government vehicle in a wrong place in front of the hotel, that you're not allowed to park there. You must think you're really big, that you're a government agency employee and you can do this. And after Oswald was shot, the man saw the pictures on TV like everyone else and said, that's him. That's the guy. Well, there's a problem with that because the government claims Oswald was in Mexico City at the time. They've never produced a single film footage, photograph, or even an audio recording that supposedly the Warren Commission got a hold of some telephone conversations that somebody tried to put forth that this is Oswald in Mexico. And they said the voice could not be identified as Oswald. And he was at the Cuban consulate, and they said we had spy cameras that day. They just happened not to be working. So we don't have any photographs of the actual Oswald in Mexico City. Just take our word for it. And upon investigating it further, you find there were two men on a bus to Mexico City, both claiming to be Oswald, and neither one matched his description, not even close. So, something was funny, as if they needed to establish some kind of alibi if Oswald was going to take part in the conspiracy to kill President Kennedy in Washington, where a few days after that encounter in late September, President Kennedy was scheduled to be in an open-car motorcade with Haile Selassie, the leader of Ethiopia, through the streets of Washington, and it would go right past the Willard Hotel. And that's where you get some really spooky coincidences in this building. Chuck in the comments had said, and I've not thought about this. Chuck says that Oswald interview with the press while in custody has always seemed odd to me, and I don't. That was that an like a press conference almost sort of thing. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, he was taken. Yeah, the cops took him to an interview room where the press was assembled. In the very back of the room, you could see in a photograph or two, Jack Ruby is watching very intently. He was stalking Oswald. It was clear over and over that he kept trying to get into police rooms to get to see him, to get close to him. And they said, Jack, you can't come in here. And so he had his own mafia ties. And a TV host, Morton Downey Jr., you remember that fellow?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The mouth. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. He said, in the summer of '63, I interviewed Dr. Arthur Ochsner of the Ochsner Cancer Institute in New Orleans. Dr. Ochsner told me that I'm not sure when the interview was, but Dr. Ochsner told me that Jack Ruby, when he became famous for shooting Oswald, was in that cancer institute in the summer in New Orleans and diagnosed with terminal cancer. So therefore, there's a motive. You know you're going to die anyway. The mafia is pressuring you to do this. They might get paid if you can get away with it. And, he was the perfect guy to walk up. He had access to the various police officers and police headquarters in Dallas. And he shot Oswald almost at point blank range in front of the whole world to forever silence the man. And that's the end of the story. There's not going to be a trial or any official investigation. And everybody kind of just closed up shop and said, well, that's a shame. And it was a lone gunman, and that's that. And ever since, the story has fallen apart terribly.
Very much so. And so your thought, because I mean, at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, because I mean, I know enough about this, but I mean, it's been some time before really looking deeply into this. Ruby was portrayed after that act as by everyone as a patriot, and said that he did it out of patriotic duty, opposed to anything else, regardless of what really is the reason, right? I mean, that was kind of how it was portrayed to the public.
Yeah. I in my book from 2018, I compiled about 8 or 9 Jack Ruby excuses. He said he wanted to be a hero, said he wanted to keep Jackie Kennedy from having to go to Dallas for the ordeal of a trial, said he wanted to show that Jews have guts, said that he wanted to be a patriot and do the right thing, and on and on. He made up all kinds of excuses. And at one point in his trial, he leaned forward and told the reporter, my lawyer told me to say these things, to make up excuses for why he did it. And so he just kind of blurted out the truth. I think he wanted to tell more before he passed of cancer in jail, but the media was limited, almost no interviews really at all. He did give an interview on camera sitting in that courtroom and said, there was a conspiracy. It goes very high up. I can't talk about it. But even he said, he admitted that there was more than one gunman, and he did what he had to do. I did read an FBI document that got released a few years ago that said I was standing on a street corner, this man, near the post office in downtown Dallas, and Jack Ruby was with me. And he said, you want to see some fireworks? Stick around and look over there at Dealey Plaza, like about a block and a half away. And the shots went off, and then Ruby turned around and went back to this newspaper office that he had just been in. And the newspaper people said he was there trying to place an ad, but he had mysteriously walked out just in time to see the shooting. Like he knew it was coming, and even told this person, there's going to be some fireworks. You want to stick around and see this, like it's history in the making. So I think Ruby knew through his mafia connections that the president was going to die, and it was going to be a big historic event. But they had trouble getting rid of Oswald, and it fell to Ruby to do it himself, and he manned up and did it, unfortunately. He was a pretty sleazy character with a long record of criminal conduct and a little psycho behavior. He went back to the Chicago Mafia of the 1940s, and I don't think in any way he was coordinating the assassination, but I think he knew about it.
Let's do this. I want to go ahead and I want to take our first break. When we come back, Paul, I'd like to talk a little bit about motives, the reasons why this conspiracy even happened, and also if anyone has any questions, put it in the comments. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I've told you about the out-of-the-world roast beef sandwiches at Maverick's Real Roast Beef, but I haven't told you about their Philly steak sandwiches, turkey bacon avocado sandwich, BLT, crispy chicken, fish sandwiches, brisket, or pulled pork. Okay, you get the idea. They make a lot of delicious food to the same standard as their famous roast beef sandwiches, and now I'm starving. I'm going to go to Maverick's Real Roast Beef off Lexington and Roseville, and you need to go too. Check out their menu at mavericksbeef.com.
What if one day could open your heart, spark your spirit, and connect you to your most authentic self? That day is Saturday, August 23rd from 10 to 6 at the Litz Rock Shops Woo Woo Festival at the Taylors Falls Memorial Community Center, located at 312 Government Street in Taylors Falls. Explore tarot, oracle, psychic, and mediumship readings. Listen to inspiring speakers covering fascinating metaphysical topics. Soak in the calm tones of live hand pan music. Shop handcrafted goods, crystals, metaphysical tools, books, and more. It's just $5 cash at the door as a free will offering. And remember, Taylors Falls is a destination. Come out for the festival and stay to explore the natural beauty, historic charm, and energy of this incredible town. And yes, there will be walking tacos.
The Let's Rock Shop's Woo Woo Festival, Saturday, August 23rd from 10 to 6 at 312 Government Street, Taylors Falls Memorial Community Center. Just $5 at the door. Come for the woo, stay for the wonder, and the walking tacos.
Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
Greg Bakun here. I love historic tours of Minneapolis and seeing everything it has to offer. But if you know me, I like to include a little spooky in my tours, which is why I found the perfect combination. Minneapolis Trolley Tours does this amazing candlelight ghost tour that you have to check out. It's an extremely immersive experience. It's a trolley trip that starts out at a haunted mansion, traveling around Minneapolis locations exposing ghost stories that the public and business owners would rather left untold. Then a tour of the aforementioned haunted mansion where ghosts of past residents from the 1800s reside, plus a lot of surprises to discover. Next, experience Gertrude's After Hours. Did I mention Gertrude is the mansion's most famous ghost? Maybe she'll show up. And you finish up the tour at Gertrude's Lounge in the haunted basement of the mansion with refreshments and Q&A. The trolleys are climate controlled and the mansion is restored to perfection. Check out MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for more information. And welcome back to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you for joining us on this sleety, snowy evening. What better thing to do in November as we are approaching the 61st anniversary, I believe that is on November 22nd, of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And that has been, has been nothing but conspiracy talk pretty much since then. The book we are talking about that's not available, but you could still find copies is JFK and the Willard Hotel Plot by Paul Blake Smith, who is our guest tonight. And Paul, are you okay? Are you open to going to get some questions from the audience?
Let her rip.
All right, let's see here. First of all, because this ties. Well, first of all, I'm going to say Linda. Linda says, so far, Paul Blake Smith has introduced new info that I haven't heard before about JFK's death. And that's high praise, I think, because there's a lot of stuff out there. And just, it's hard to keep up with everything. And that stuff you sent me a couple days ago, number one, was cool. But secondly, it's like, oh, well, that's interesting. So thank you for that. That was pretty cool. Let's see here. I had a question, and I'm going to put Damien's question in there with it as well. We talked briefly about the Zapruder film, and that could be a whole episode on its own, especially after it was returned with a lot of stuff missing from it.
Yeah, that's right. The CIA got a hold of it.
They got a hold of it. They were like, oh, we just need it to make a copy and do whatever. And they got it back, and it wasn't the same film, basically.
Right.
So that's something else to talk about. But Damien asked the question, does Paul think if all the evidence is put into AI videos, everything will it disprove the stated facts and unlock the box?
Oh, I don't know how you would handle that. Since it's artificial intelligence, I wouldn't trust that either. You see, we want the truth and not maybe a simulated artificial thing, but it's an interesting idea. We talked about that bullet that fell out, and that was in that document. Mm-hmm. If you've ever watched the Oliver Stone movie JFK, there's a real life incident at the autopsy. There's a third thoracic vertebrae back wound of the president. And one of the autopsy doctors said, I can stick the end of my finger in the wound and fill that bullet in there. And they said, that's enough. That won't be necessary. Stop doing that. And so that, again, just blows away the single bullet theory. They moved up the nature of the neck or the back wound into the back of the neck when they produced these phony drawings of the Kennedy assassination, not actual autopsy photos. So they rigged it that way and claimed, well, that went through the back of his neck and came out in front. When everyone at the Dallas hospital said, we were treating an entry wound here about the size of your little finger right here that caused him to start gagging. just before the main headshot. So I don't mean to interrupt, but there's a number of bullet stories that you could add, and I think most of them are true, and none of them come together for a coherent single bullet nonsense.
Which, it's laughable, isn't it? Quite frankly,
it is. Yeah.
So, and when Damien's talking about AI, my mind went to, I'm a Beatles fan, and last year they released this single, The Last Signal Now and Then, and they took a poor quality recording from John Lennon and pulled out his vocal track, and that's all through AI. Sounds really good. I do wonder if AI could eventually be used to look at some of that really grainy film and other footage, to see if it's pulling anything out that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, it's worth a try. I mean, they even took some images of the Beatles from long ago and put that through AI, and it looks so good. They sounded so good. It was a beautiful song, and now it's up for a Grammy Award. But to get back to kind of the point of this, you wanted to know before the break, who was responsible for this? Who did this to President Kennedy? I'm quite convinced that it began with the American mafia, namely Carlos Marcello, who was a guest at the Willard Hotel around the time of JFK's inauguration in January of 1961. He had a great view of the open car motorcade rolling past from the White House down the street right in front of him. And he even could see that you could look down from the hotel upper floors from the window into the White House lawn and see some of the White House. So, to have run through his head at the time, this would be a great place to shoot somebody if you didn't like him, either on his lawn or as he rolled past in his limousine. I think exactly what they wanted to do when JFK announced in May of 1963 that he's going to welcome Haile Selassie to America and have a big welcoming committee out on the lawn, and what it developed into a open car motorcade, and it was going to go right past the Willard Hotel. So presto, you saw Oswald at the hotel, and that President Kennedy was even in the hotel giving a speech in the summer of 1963. And what will blow you away even further is Abraham Lincoln and John Wilkes Booth all spent a little time in that hotel 100 years previously.
That's crazy. That's amazing.
After he was elected, he's preparing to be inaugurated. Lincoln stayed in a hotel room at the Willard with his wife, getting his inauguration address ready. And he had a lot of security, including people up on the roof with rifles, even then. And a few years later, on the night of his murder, he was to go to, it was announced in the newspapers that he would go to Ford's Theater for a play. And of course, John Wilkes Booth hated Lincoln and he wanted him dead. And he went into the Willard Hotel room looking around like a psycho with like crazed eyes and everything. And Ulysses S. Grant and his wife were invited by the Lincolns to go to the booth that night, the luxury box, if you want to call it that, at Ford's Theater. And Mrs. Grant noticed this madman staring at her, glowering at her, that he recognized her as U.S. Grant's wife. She was going to be in that booth, that he was going to attack that night. And she hastily gathered up her things, she said, and got out of there. She got a bad feeling from this guy, and justifiably so. And they said she met up with U.S. Grant, the famous general, and they rode through the streets of Washington, in a buggy, horse and buggy. And who kept stalking them and glowering at them in the street? It was John Wilkes Booth. He scared them so much they got out of town and did not go to the Ford's Theater that night. So that saved their lives, but it's just bizarre that Oswald, Booth, Lincoln, and Kennedy were all in that same hotel, along with Carlos Marcello. And after the Kennedy assassination, who was there? Oswald's wife was taken there by the government so she could stay in the hotel with Oswald's mother, preparing to give testimony to the Warren Commission. Of all the places, they put her in the Willard Hotel right near the White House.
It's almost macabre, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, it really is something
up like a fictional novel.
No, not at all. And, I just, before we go back to Kennedy, I always think, too, that one of the most craziest pictures, too, is Lincoln's second inaugural address at the Capitol, and up above in the stand, in the bleachers,
there
is John Wilkes Booth. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. So, and so with that, with you thinking that the mob wants to take care of Kennedy, and forgive me if you went over this, what was the reason for that?
He took a lot of mafia money to get elected. From Marcello tried to give money to them. I don't know if they were able to get that dough, but Sam Giancana contributed plenty. And I think Santos Trafficante. Those are the big three mobsters in this country. And over time, it didn't take too long, actually, the Kennedys formed the War on Organized Crime, and they were determined to destroy the mafia in America. Well, that didn't sit too well. What does the mafia do for a living? They kill people to get what they want. And so it's not that big of a shock that the mafia organized this, but they didn't want to pull it off themselves because it would be too easily traced to them. They didn't want to go to jail. So they had to hire some guns, and I think that's where possibly Oswald and his Cuban immigrant friends, who he hung out with in the summer of '63 in New Orleans, put this together along with David Ferry and Guy Bannister guiding them. At one point, somebody said they saw, I think, Ferry and Oswald firing rifles together on a barge on the Mississippi, and they were at a training camp that was eventually shut down. You saw that in the movie JFK by Oliver Stone. So they were connected a number of times in a number of ways, and it doesn't make any sense because from the traditional conspiracy point of view, that they were preparing for Dallas. Well, Dallas hadn't even been announced when they were there together training to shoot in New Orleans in the summer of '63. But Washington, D.C. had been announced, and this is what they were originally plotting, I believe. And I put together 10 different clues that talk about the plan was for Washington near the Willard Hotel, possibly even firing from the hotel itself. That plan fell through when there were TV cameras outside and a huge crowd, and nobody wanted to fire and get seen and identified, even beyond live television. And there was always, in a JFK motorcade, a big press truck with live TV and newsreel. You see the newsreel cameras going. They still had those in those days. They would follow right after the JFK motorcade. Well, that got changed in Dallas. The media truck was pushed way, way back in the motorcade by a Secret Service planner who did 10 different things in Dallas than normal. And I think this man was in on it. He knew about the plot, didn't care for Kennedy. All it took was one man high up in the Secret Service to strip away the protection for Kennedy. You see the newsreels of the limousine going by, and there's hardly anyone around it. There's cops on motorcycles behind it, but on either side and in front, he's laid bare. And if you ever see photographs of Kennedy in motorcades in other cities and even in other countries, he is surrounded by cops on motorcycles, cops on foot, Secret Service men holding on to the side of the car. They really protected him. But in Dallas, he got hung out to dry.
So I had heard, and we hear so many different things, so I don't know it's real or not real. But I'd heard that LBJ himself had a hand in a change with the route of the motorcade in Dallas. Is there any truth to that?
He might have. He knew a lot of people in Dallas. And according to a senator who was sitting in the car with him, trailing the Kennedy vehicle through Dallas, LBJ suddenly ducked down and bent down in the back of the vehicle, pretending to be hunched over this portable radio. And he really ducked down just before the shots were fired. What a coincidence. And so that looks awfully suspicious. And there's a photograph of Kennedy upon the first shot, waving and putting his hands up. In the far background, there's the Johnson limousine. And just as this senator said, you can see the senator and Lady Bird in the back seat, but there's no Johnson. He's supposed to be there, but he had ducked down before the shots were fired.
That's incredible. I mean, and if that were to be the case, I mean, you don't get much higher than that. in this conspiracy. And that's
I'll make clear, I don't think he had any part in really planning the gunman and how they would pull this off. He just wanted it done. And E. Howard Hunt of the CIA said on his deathbed, and it's recorded, that LBJ knew about the plot. And the only thing he said about it was, hurry it up. What are you waiting for? Let's get this done. He wanted to be president desperately. And he's like, well, if you have to kill him, do what you got to do.
And it makes sense. And it makes sense, too, because, obviously he doesn't want to be too attached to it. You don't want to be able to pinpoint the planning. It's just very much like, all he has to do is give the thumbs up or thumbs down if he's ready for it. And that's all that it takes.
When he was announced as JFK's vice president in a hotel in Los Angeles in the summer of 60, LBJ stepped out into the hall with reporters and blurted out, I understand 1 in 4 American presidents die in office, and I am a gambling man. He had it in his mind right off the bat that Kennedy's going to die and make me president. And he stupidly said this at the time. So,
well, and you got to wonder, too, and this is really kind of veering a little bit off topic in a sense, but LBJ had this notion that he's going to die at a certain age. It was like
bad heart.
Yeah, because everyone, his father and others in the family died at that age. And not this, I think it's more of the mafia thing, but he wanted to be president. I'm sure he thought time is running out for him as well.
When he was teaching school as a young man, he even reportedly told his students, you better be nice to me. I'm going to be president of the United States one day. And they all laughed at him. But this was in his mind early on. He became a congressman, worked his way up to senator, became Senate Majority Leader, he wanted to run for president in 1960, but he thought he would just take over the convention and handle it that way without actually having to run in the primaries. And so he got thwarted. But then, according to JFK's secretary, Evelyn Lincoln, LBJ went into the hotel room with the Kennedy brothers and said, either you pick me as your vice presidential running mate, or my friend J. Edgar Hoover and I will expose all the sexual dirt we have on you. So he blackmailed his way onto the ticket. And Evelyn Lincoln said the two Kennedy brothers met and talked it over. It was intense, she said. And they thought, there's no way we can get out of this. Just put him on the ticket. And that's how LBJ ended up being vice president and someday president.
We are talking with author Paul Blake Smith. We are talking about the JFK assassination conspiracy. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, take our next break. Bruce, I see your comment. We'll get to that after the break. Anyone else has anything to say, put it in the comments. We'll do our best to get to them. There's so much to talk about here. I'm really enjoying this. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I've told you about the out-of-the-world roast beef sandwiches at Maverick's Real Roast Beef, but I haven't told you about their Philly steak sandwiches, turkey bacon avocado sandwich, BLT, crispy chicken, fish sandwiches, brisket, or pulled pork. Okay, you get the idea. They make a lot of delicious food to the same standard as their famous roast beef sandwiches, and now I'm starving. I'm going to go to Maverick's Real Roast Beef off Lexington and Roseville, and you need to go too. Check out their menu at mavericksbeef.com.
What if one day could open your heart, spark your spirit, and connect you to your most authentic self? That day is Saturday, August 23rd from 10 to 6 at the Litz Rocks Shops Woo Woo Festival at the Taylors Falls Memorial Community Center, located at 312 Government Street in Taylors Falls. Explore tarot, oracle, psychic, and mediumship readings. Listen to inspiring speakers covering fascinating metaphysical topics. Soak in the calm tones of live hand pan music. Shop handcrafted goods, crystals, metaphysical tools, books, and more. It's just $5 cash at the door as a free will offering. And remember, Taylors Falls is a destination. Come out for the festival and stay to explore the natural beauty, historic charm, and energy of this incredible town. And yes, there will be walking tacos.
The Let's Rock Shop's Woo Festival, Saturday, August 23rd from 10 to 6 at 312 Government Street, Taylors Falls Memorial Community Center. Just $5 at the door. Come for the woo, stay for the wonder, and the walking tacos.
Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. and she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
Greg Bakun here. I love historic tours of Minneapolis and seeing everything it has to offer. But if you know me, I like to include a little spooky in my tours, which is why I found the perfect combination. Minneapolis Trolley Tours does this amazing candlelight ghost tour that you have to check out. It's an extremely immersive experience. It's a trolley trip that starts out at a haunted mansion, traveling around Minneapolis locations exposing ghost stories that the public and business owners would rather left untold. Then a tour of the aforementioned haunted mansion where ghosts of past residents from the 1800s reside, plus a lot of surprises to discover. Next, experience Gertrude's After Hours. Did I mention Gertrude is the mansion's most famous ghost? Maybe she'll show up. And you finish up the tour at Gertrude's Lounge in the haunted basement of the mansion with refreshments and Q&A. The trolleys are climate controlled and the mansion is restored to perfection. Check out MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for more information. And welcome back to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you very much for joining us. We are acknowledging the 61st anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and we are talking about all the conspiracy that has gone around that event. And tonight I have with me, I'm very happy to have with me, author Paul Blake Smith. We've had him on before talking about President Eisenhower and aliens, as well as the Nixon-Gleason alien encounter. These are books that you can get off of Amazon. Just look up Paul Blake Smith. Also, a lot of what we're talking about tonight is from a book that he has published that unfortunately is not it's not currently in publication, but you can find copies. JFK and the Willard Hotel Plot. And this is such a great conversation. And Bruce asked the question because we were talking about, you know, you have the Secret Service person who is making changes. You talked about the 10 changes that hasn't been done anywhere else in any of the JFK motorcades and appearances. And I think the really interesting question Bruce asks is, do you think that Kennedy might have noticed these changes, might have tried to correct some of the changes in the security if he had noticed?
That's a very good question. He had to have noticed, right, that there was actually an earlier motorcade that took Kennedy from his hotel in Fort Worth out to the airport where they took a flight to Dallas. And there was plenty of security for that. But by the time the Dallas parade started, the Kennedy Secret Service people were waved off. And you can even see a film footage at the Love Field Airport where they start to protect the car. And a guy in the Secret Service car following behind him waves him, said, "No, get away from there," and left it totally out in the open. Another step was that normally there would be these police cars, uniformed police officers. They were only on a few motorcycles. They were pared down from 6 to 4 and told, don't go past the back wheels of the limousine during the course of the parade. Leaving him totally open from the front, you couldn't have been more exposed. So even as the car rolled around Dallas, I'm sure Kennedy was like, where is my security today? Dallas was the most dangerous place. People warned him not to go there. There was Adlai Stevenson was attacked and whacked with a sign by protesters like a week or so beforehand. It was a known hotbed of right-wing extremists and people talking about filling the president with buckshot when he comes down here. And there was the wanted dead or alive poster of JFK floating through the city. You know, that's very famous nowadays. And they didn't treat him too well before he got there. Kennedy knew that there was a plan to shoot him, actually. I pointed this out in my book, during the summer of '63, possibly from a rooftop. And he blurted this out the night before his death to one of his aides who reported it in a book. He said, last night would have been a great time to shoot a president from a rooftop, maybe with a high-powered rifle. And so he was aware of that general threat that was out there. And he heroically or foolishly got in that limousine to show his connection with the people. He liked to roll around in various big cities in an open car motorcade and connect with people. He wanted to get those votes in the next election. He was most delighted that Jackie unusually agreed to accompany him to Texas. It's a real interesting story that the famous Reverend Graham, not Franklin Graham's father, I can't remember, but he had a premonition that something terrible was going to happen. And he thought, gosh, I better do something. So he got on the phone to the White House and warned him, don't go to Texas. And they told him, oh, he just left for the airport. He's on his way to Texas right now. So Reverend Graham, the famous
Billy
pastor,
Graham?
Yeah, Billy Graham. Yeah,
Billy
there you
Graham,
go.
right?
Got a mental blank there.
Yeah,
he said, I had this terrible feeling. And on the flight down to Dallas, Evelyn Lincoln said, I just got the most horrible feeling that something terrible is going to happen. And they had Pierre Salinger worked in the White House, said he got letters from people in Dallas saying, don't come down here. They're going to try to kill him. But they didn't name names, and some of them didn't print their own names on the letters. And they figured that's just a crank. We get letters all the time. So there were warnings, there were premonitions. And the whole thing was just spooky, almost like it had to be.
It's interesting. I'm gonna kind of walk away from the conspiracy for a second. Are you aware of? And I can't remember the person's name who created a cult that believed that John F. Kennedy was going to come back. He was going to come back to Dallas. And he actually
the last place you would want to come back to, the place you were murdered in the street. Yeah, that's just the silliest stuff,
isn't it? I mean, and it actually was noteworthy because he had so many followers, and I don't remember all the details. I remember that there's a lot of stuff about the details that really was very anachronistic to anything that Kennedy would have been a part of, ideology wise. But it was something that it's really pretty crazy. And I think it's interesting to note, the political climate now in terms of hatred of either candidates, any side, right?
Yeah.
And that was, that was still, we think of that as, I think of it as relatively new in a sense, like to that sort of extreme hatred, but that's clearly not the case. Going back to 1963, November of 1963, don't go to Dallas. Oh, wow. Chuck, boy, you really know your stuff tonight, Chuck. Chuck is the QAnon cult leader, Michael Brian Protzman. That's right. Very interesting about that cult. And he's now passed away. Maybe he's with Kennedy for all I know. I don't know.
Maybe they're both going to come back.
Yeah, maybe they're both. That was the plan. But
has anyone ever come back from anything? I mean, it's just the silliest stuff.
Well, truly. And so, yeah, it's so interesting. Now, we didn't really talk about the grassy knoll, and that's one of the biggest pieces of it. Do you think that the Bruder film identifies who was at least like a clear image of who is there?
Not really. It has this dark, shadowy area, and it was perfect for shooting from behind a fence, shaded by trees, with almost no one back there. A man was working the railroad command post behind it and said he saw this car circling around with suspicious figures before the assassination, thought he heard shots from that area, and that he wanted to testify to the Warren Commission that he's pretty sure, I think his name was Lee Bowers, and that he was going to tell the world his story. He had a convenient car accident, as a number of people had just happened to pass away before they could testify to the Warren Commission. And it's also interesting to note, not a single person from Dealey Plaza told the story of the Kennedy assassination the way the Warren Commission decided it happened. Nobody seemed to agree with it, including the direct eyewitnesses who so many times said the shots came from in front, and plus Oswald's shots from up above and back.
Was the Warren Commission kind of a joke in itself then? Because
it was slanted with Allen Dulles and J. Edgar Hoover feeding them information that only pointed to Oswald, and they cut off discussion of any sort of conspiracy. I think they wanted to placate the American people that all is well. We caught the guy. The case is wrapped up. And Johnson wanted that as well in order to get reelected in 64. They didn't do nearly enough. And the House Select Committee in the 70s said there was a probable conspiracy. They sort of defied or thumbed their nose at the findings of the Warren Commission, acting on more information. They fed the information they found all to the Department of Justice, and they did nothing, and the case just died legally.
Was at that point George Bush Sr. Heading the FBI or CIA? I forget if it's FBI or CIA.
He was a CI director in the mid-70s. Okay. Some people feel they see him in a picture of the book depository and out in front. And there is a guy that does look a lot like him, but it's been proven that Bush was in a town like 30, 40 miles south of Dallas giving a campaign speech. He was going to run for the Senate. And he also issued, once he heard the Kennedy assassination, just after the speech, he funneled a report to the FBI saying, I heard conspiracy plans from a man named James Parrott while Kennedy was in Houston, that they were going to shoot him there. So that report was filed from this Texas town by George H.W. Bush. He had no part in the killing, and he was not even in Dallas on the day of the assassination.
Interesting. When did it become fodder for conspiracy? Was it almost immediate that people were like, this isn't, and I don't mean like people around like close to it. I mean, just like the general public started to be like, this doesn't seem right. Was that something that
I think it slowly started? Yeah. After a year or two, an author and then a second author came out and said, I don't believe this is right. These stories are not adding up. I'm trying to think of the man's name. Mark Lane was one, an attorney who actually knew President Kennedy and posed for a picture with him, began interviewing people, and they would, tell him stories like, I saw these men before the motorcade at the picket fence, and they left a bunch of cigarette butts there and footprints, and I heard shots from that area. And so he found other people that backed that up. And an author named Josiah Thompson in the 60s also came to the same conclusion. Oswald did not act alone. We were not told the whole truth. And from there into the 70s, it snowballed. More and more people came forward as the government became more crooked and hated by people, and they wanted it exposed after Watergate and the Vietnam War fiasco. So that's why the House Select Committee had no choice but to go forward with what they hoped was a legitimate investigation, and the CIA kind of put their fingerprints all over it and kept it limited to a probable conspiracy, and after that, nothing.
We have about 3.5 minutes left here, and one of the things that showed up in the comments early on was the thought of wondering if we're ever going to get all the files, if we're going to get really all the information, and my gut instinct says that there is no way on earth that we're going to ever get an official story on that assassination. It just seems like that's too, that seems like something that if American government, even though it's been removed by 3 generations from the actual assassination, that it's one of those things that you just can't imagine that they would do in fear of like, oh, then you can never trust the government. We already don't trust the government.
Yeah.
What do you?
I don't think in our lifetimes we will get all the files and all the information. Maybe after 100 years. And an example is the Lincoln assassination had a lot of questions about it, and the government held back certain data. And what Lincoln had in his pockets at the time of the assassination, they finally released that like in the early 70s. And he had like a handkerchief and glasses and a few cards in his wallet and such. And like this had to be kept secret from the American public, what was in Lincoln's pockets at the time, So the government just when in doubt, cover everything up. And they waited over 100 years to reveal some things about the Lincoln killing. So I think it'll be over 100 years for the Kennedy when everyone's dead and gone, and maybe there's nobody left to really care anymore.
I don't know. Now, the book that is currently not in circulation, JFK and the Willard Hotel plot that you wrote in 2018, do you foresee that getting published again at some point?
Yeah, I'm going to try to get a new publisher and see if I can update a few things. I'm not the world's leading expert, but I got a lot of information, and I talked to some helpful people. And I'm convinced that the Kennedy presidency upset so many people, conservatives, Cubans from the Castro regime, the Russians, the Chinese, the conservative media, the mafia. There was like a gang after gang after gang after the Kennedys, and it was almost inevitable that somebody was going to try this. I wish Kennedy had been less about vanity and appearing out in open to wave to people without any obstruction, or at least policemen are alongside him. And today they all travel by what they call the tank, this bulletproof, huge monster limo that protects them even from bombs and explosions. But back then, a president would ride around like this, and he paid the ultimate price.
He sure did. And in either he was blissfully unaware, or he maybe even accepted his fate, or he was a gambling man himself when he realizes that changes are being done to the security in Dallas, and he's just going with it. I mean, it's so fascinating.
It's tragic. One of the last words he spoke was Governor Connolly's wife turned around and said, "You can't say Dallas doesn't love you." And he said, "That's right." And like seconds later, he was gone. I think he died on impact. Technically, he was still alive when they brought him into Parkland Hospital with entry wound to the head, blowing out the back, entry wound to the throat, and a third thoracic vertebrae down in the back, entry wound. He could not have survived that. You would not survive that even with today's medical technology.
Author Paul Blake Smith. We're talking about JFK and the Willard Hotel plot. We're going to have you back on, Paul. It's always great to have you. Thank you. This was a fantastic episode. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm glad to talk to you, and I'm hoping everyone enjoyed it. I wish that my book was available. I don't think you can get a copy, but you could try. And someday it'll be re-released better than ever.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a great night.